There we go. Okay, folks, it's 3:30. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Dunn County Executive Committee to order. Perhaps we will get out of here quickly. It doesn't look like a terribly heavy agenda, but we will start. We've now called to order, call the roll. Everybody is here. Randy is online, everybody except for Tom Quinn, who hopefully will sail in the next 10 minutes. So that's called roll, approval of the minutes, and it's a package deal. There's a bunch of them. Okay. Supervisor Steen moves. Supervisor Morehouse seconds. Any speaking to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Public comments. Do we have anyone here from the, Tom has joined us now. So we are all here. Anyone from the public? Come on up, Supervisor Bjork. Oh, you don't appear to be. Not a great technology start.
Just a minute, I'm gonna cross this off. Got that done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to the executive committee. I guess what brought me here today more than anything is well, a sore throat. But what I've been reading and your agendas about who can speak and when they can speak, and it seems to be unclear to me what you're going after. I never gave much thought to how important the executive committee was. My first indication was on serving in Health and Human Services, and I got Larry Bjork on, or Gary, but it's Larry. Never gave much concern to how important the executive committee was. And being on Health and Human Services at that time, I sat across the table from where the chair of the executive committee says, if I can elected to vice chair, then this would be an open seat. And a person that wanted to be on the executive committee was then made chair and put on the executive committee. I think anywhere in the county, if your political beliefs, whether it has to do with your sexuality, it has to do with your hair, or has to do with your heritage, and even your political affiliations would be frowned on. And I didn't introduce myself. Do I need to do that? Okay.
You might as well.
Larry Bjork, E7643, 430th Avenue, Menominee, Wisconsin. So I was very, very pleased and fortunate when I was first appointed to county board, or elected to the county board, to be on the CRNT, which at one time was called the Ag Committee, and one of their biggest priorities is working with University Extension. And I had been an extension agent for a year and a half before I started farming, and I had I thought, real solid background in knowledge and procedures of University Extension. So at that time, Jim Anderson was chairman, and he was there until he retired. And then Jim Zahns was chairman, and he resigned. So I thought, well, maybe this is going to be Larry's shot to the executive committee. It seems to be kind of an important role in county government. So with 6 years of experience on the committee and experience with University Extension, I thought, I didn't do any calling. I could have, I just didn't. I just thought that the merits would show that I could possibly be the next chair of CR&T and then be part of this group. Well, that ain't the way it went. Uh, Guy sitting right next to me, a good guy, was brought on to CR&T, hadn't served on it at all, and was made chair. So I felt there was a political slight made because my opinions don't share the majority. But even people that have wrong opinions have a reason and an opportunity to speak. So I'm disappointed that so I'm saying it now because down the road I may not be able to say it. I'm disappointed that I was overlooked, and guy's doing a good job, Bob, but University Extension has gone through a lot of changes, and University Extension is going to have friends on the county board for them to survive. So thank you for your time, and you got a lot going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bjork. Anyone else? That does not look like it, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. County Manager's Report, Chris.
All right, good afternoon. I'm going to start with I wanted to, before, I know you don't have anything in front of you related to the 2023 audit report. That will be included in the county board packet that'll go out tomorrow. And the audit representative of the audit firm, Dave Minch, will be at the next week's county board meeting to run through that audit report as they typically do. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a prep because what he presents, and I'm not exactly sure how he will present the information, but on its surface, the audit report looks as if we are returning $2.7 million to the general fund. The practical reality is that because we have shifted our processes for the highway department's accounting, we budgeted $3 million to them last year and then didn't move it. We assumed they didn't. The way the system works, and this is why we're looking at a new ERP, is sort of like if you need it, you'll get it. Well, the practical reality of it was budgeted to them. It was budgeted in the form of, help me out, Dan. It was not the leftover. It is we receive levy, we pool levy, shared revenue, and sales tax, and the wheel tax into kind of one chunk. And that was part of that was budgeted to them. We didn't move it. So the practical reality of it is that essentially our general fund balance ended up about even. And so we moved that money in 24. It will be reflected in the 2024 audit report. But I just want you to be aware that as we enter into this conversation about budget, we don't have that 2.7 extra million dollars, and you'll see where we're really at, taking that into consideration. But we're about where we're at the year before. Questions about that?
Supervisor Kinnear.
I gotta admit, I didn't understand what you're telling me.
Okay, so a practical reality.
Totally fair.
Let's say we budgeted $10 million of revenue to the highway department. We only gave them 7. We didn't move it within our financial system. We budgeted it, but we didn't move it. And so when the auditors looked at it, they're like, oh, you didn't spend this $3 million. And the practical reality of it is once it was allocated to the highway department, it became their money. It wasn't their because they're an enterprise fund, or portion of their activities, at least our enterprise fund, what they got, they keep. And so we didn't move it within SAP. So the auditor didn't move it in the audit, and we only caught that after the fact. Does that make more sense?
Yes, somewhat more.
Supervisor Headland.
Yeah, I guess my way of looking at it was, again, like Chris said, it was part of their budget. And it just hadn't got moved, but it also distorted what we thought we had excess.
Yes.
And there really wasn't that much excess. And so I guess that's,
That's a good way of saying
so
it.
we thought we were sitting on, $17 and we in fact had 14.
And when the audit is finalized and all the reports are submitted on the statewide, then it's certified, it's done. We can't go back and fix it they'll fix it in the next year. So. All right, draft county board agenda. Let's see here. So you will receive the audit report. We're going to do a real brief introduction to the new greater, it's not great. I see it as an error of my own report, this is why you proof things. Greater Dunn County Economic Development Director. His name is Adam McCullough. We've been talking about that for quite some time. So he's just going to come and do a 5-minute intro to the county board. We have, but Beata and I will be prepared to do a budget update. Andrew has one more scenario county services, and since he wrote it, we're going to use it and just play it just as individuals. It'll take 5 minutes. Board reports or department reports by the district attorney and the treasurer. And then some relatively routine budget adjustments, resolution appointing the corporation counsel upon Nick's retirement, and zoning change. A rezone, yep. Oh, a change in the land information council composition. And resolution on amending the capital improvements plan for the addition of the $11 million for geothermal in 2025, geothermal and solar in 2025. Any questions about that? Because some of those are relatively significant items.
I presume we've issued an invitation for James McMenamy to be there at the meeting so that
He will be here.
yeah, I figured that was the case, but
Mhm.
in my tick box
I
list.
already warned him, well, no, I told Supervisor Bjork that I warned him, that he may have questions for him, so
There you go.
he'll be there.
So you, so yeah, so
Just a
there
second,
is,
Supervisor Steen, did you have something?
Yeah, getting back to the money that we had and didn't have, I'm trying to get my head around it. How did that affect our budgeting process then?
it didn't really. It didn't. It's,
I think the shortest possible explanation is we have like arbitrarily 6 pots of money and the money was sitting over here and it was supposed to be over here and we had not transferred it. So the auditors have to note it as being here, but we need to move it over there ex post facto.
it doesn't
Change
I
that
mean,
much.
it affects going forward in the sense that it makes the highway department more financially solid, but it doesn't affect, and it leaves, it leaves less fund balance for the next budget cycle, but we didn't have that fund balance to begin with. We had already budgeted it last year. Well, this year.
And hence my question, how did it affect the budgeting process or the thinking process? Is that if you thought you had it, your outlook on what you're going through might be different than if you knew you didn't have it.
Right. This is for next year, though. So that's, yes. Will it affect the future? Yes. You would not have, at this point in time, I don't mean to be crass. You didn't know you had it. And I'm just telling you that before you figure it out, you're not going to have it again.
All I can say is then this year we should know what we have.
Yes. And
That's my point.
you do, and you did last, the decisions that you made in 2023 for 2024 were made on valid information. Nothing changed about that. It isn't an error in the sense that there was money allocated and spent in some way that wasn't anticipated. It is after the fact math that corrects the problem that doesn't have a financial impact on what you've approved up until now. It does going forward in the sense of, like I say, the auditor is going to tell you there's $2.7 million. The practical reality of it is there isn't $2.7 million, but you had already budgeted that for this year.
I'm pretty simple, so I need it dumbed down. I get it. But when we're
We'll look at it here in a
when we're
minute.
doing the budget process, it's important to me that I understand where everything is.
Yep, and that's
because-
why you're going to see the numbers. You'll hear them in the audit. I just didn't want you to be swayed by thinking differently from the audit. We'll give you the actual numbers here in just a minute.
You didn't want
about-
some guy like me jumping to conclusions. I understand.
Because you are always about what the bottom line is, and I'm aware of that, so.
Basically, don't spend this.
Yes,
It
don't
doesn't exist.
spend it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, there will be a petition at the county board meeting for a special December meeting or an extra December meeting. Typically, the board wouldn't meet in December. There is going to be a release of the long-awaited BEAD funding for broadband expansion. And the broadband service providers are going to need to have a board resolution of our support for their application for their projects. And their window of opportunity is roughly the end of November till November 1 to January 3. And so they're going to get their, they will receive their information on November 1st. They'll have to formulate their projects. They'll turn around, ask our resolution support. And because our November meeting is early, for budget approval, we will need to do a special meeting in December to give them resolution support for their broadband projects.
Yeah.
We anticipate we'll be able to do that remotely. Should be a very short meeting, but we will need to schedule that.
Yeah, it should be basically the only item, so it'll be 15 or 20 minutes online, probably. Well, it depends on how many questions we get.
And the petition is just gonna be brought to the county board meeting next week and circulated, and so once more than 50% of supervisors have signed it, it'll have to be honored. The clerk, the date of the meeting will be established in the petition.
All right. Quick ERP update. We released a request for proposal about a week and a half-ish ago. There's a period of time in which people that are entities that are interested in proposing can pose questions, and answers go back to the group at large of people who are interested in submitting a proposal. I believe the closure for that is rough, but I got to look to Dan again. Do you recall? I want to say it was like 5 weeks or 6. We're going to do demos at the end of October of the potential selected providers. So anyway, so that project continues to move forward. And because the funding for that project will be approved or not in the 2025 budget, you're working in like 3 years at one time. In 2025 budget, the funding or not approving of that will occur at that point in time. So we're not committing to anything at this point in time that we don't have funding for. We'll approve the budget, and then if all is in place, we'll move forward with the purchase of the product. Any questions about that? All right, that being said, Beata, I would oh, sorry, that's not my agenda, that's your agenda.
Functionally, it works the same. 6. Beata. Go.
Thank you for being so patient since I've worked my way over here. I printed you some copies as a reference, and I've also emailed that to those that are online. Just the supervisors, by the way, or supervisor. There's only one online. Okay, so I'm going to start with this from the very beginning, which what I'm going to attempt to cover as simple as possible for you is to give you a snapshot or an overview of where we are at with our existing debt. And also I put in a couple scenarios here and some analysis. So right now, the good news is how we are being rated by Standard & Poor's, which is our rating agency. So we're standing really good with that. Think of it as our FICO score. I know I'm kind of going back from the end to the top. But right now, as of our audit for 2023, we get $28.165 million of debt. So how does that really translate as to how much are we really in debt to what is really allowed, what the county's legal debt margin is? So in comparison, we're at 11.07%. That doesn't mean we go ahead and we max that out. But we have, no, we don't want to max out our credit card, right? So we have unused debt of about 226. So I just wanted to kind of paint you a picture as to how are we comparing to what we legally can and what is it that we really have in debt. I also wanted to give you a quick synopsis, and this you've probably seen these multiple times, but this kind of gives you an idea as to what do we have for debt outstanding and what did we borrow for, and when is it going to mature, meaning when are we going to pay it off. So as you see, the facility improvements that we borrowed in 2013, we're going to be done paying that off in 26. So you see that the other major debt that will come off is what we borrowed in 2014, which is for some facility improvement in this fabulous SAP we have. Sorry, being sarcastic. So this just kind of gives you to what it is that we have in debt. Now on the very bottom, I included, because we are in process of issuing debt, we're going to go, the sale is scheduled for the 18th of September. So it's in the works. And our principal payments won't begin till 2027. So that's why you see like the beginning balance in 2024, it says 0 for that debt, because we won't be making that until the 27th. So up until then would just be interest. So this is really very much the same to what you saw in the previous slide, but more in the graph format. Just so you can see how our debt is going down over time. But this again is our existing debt, and I also accounted for the one that we have in process. So we historically, just to give you little bit of a background, we've been working really close with our PMA, who is our debt issue advisor, to help us analyze and crunch numbers to give us an understanding to where we are with debt, where could we be in debt, what is our, I'm going to call tolerance level, or let's call it a ceiling, given us some assumptions. And some of the assumptions was, without having to increase our existing debt service, what we levy for, to keep it at that level, what can we borrow up to so that that's not going to go significantly up? Because as you see, we're paying more of our debt service than what it is that we would borrow. So that way you'll see the slope. This is again with our existing. So that's sweet spot tolerance, or that ceiling, without increasing that levy, what we would levy for our debt would be that 5.176 million. So kind of keep that number in mind.
And
Also,
this is also just the layman's way of saying this, because I say this to Beata all the time. This one represents if we never borrowed another dollar past today.
Right.
Well, including the one we're in session, we're in
in
process with, but
right.
if we never borrowed another dollar past the end of this year, this is what our debt service looks like.
Thank you. Okay, so mark that page and come back. So the next one is we reach out to PMA and we wanted to know, again, what was that tolerance or that sweet spot without increasing what we would levy to pay off our debt obligation. So according to his calculations, and again, this is based on the market data that was available at the time this was generated, that if what this shows you is what we would borrow, where our ceiling is at approximately at that 5.3 million. Okay, so the dark blue is our existing, and the light blue is that opportunity that we could borrow. And if we do borrow, our debt service payments would not exceed that 5.3 million. Okay, so the next slide is really
Could
identify
you-
that
could-
dollar amount.
Excuse
Yeah.
me. Could you go back to the previous slide? No,
The one after that?
that one.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one. So in 2035 and going down, does that mean we're still borrowing the same amount every single year? But I don't
Okay.
understand why it's going down. Could you explain that, please?
Yes, it's going down in 26. Right, it's slightly going down because this is where, let me go back to.
Yeah, I
we-
think I think his question is after, it's a 10-year projection on borrowing, Supervisor Kinnear. And then after 10 years, it would start to drop because you're not borrowing any longer.
Sorry.
Hang on, Supervisor Steen.
Yes, Beata. The question I have is that right now we're at 11% of our, what we could borrow. If we adopt the 5.3 throughout, what percentage would we be at then?
We would be at a, you're referring to, let's see, where do I have that?
So we'd stay unless the county's value is going to go up over time. So if we're staying at one level, we are slowly going to be going down from 11%, but it's going to be very slow because it's relative to growth. So if we were to adopt that borrowing, we would just be staying at that 11% essentially.
The reason I ask that question is because to me now, just the way I look at it, that's more simple to grasp that we're not increasing our, we're just staying where we are now to achieve what we want to achieve. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right,
Yeah.
that's what this upper line will show you.
Yeah. So
Okay, Right, go
I
ahead.
think the argument is easier made that way in my mind and maybe some other supervisors' mind. Thank you.
very welcome. No, I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I think what you're suggesting is it might be useful to have a graph in addition to that one, which is the absolute number is one of them showing what percentage of our total borrowing availability that would be. Just another point of data.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep. So at any given time, as we borrow more additional future debt and as we're paying off the debt, it would, that percentage to what is available for us to borrow. Now, keep in mind that every year, that max is determined by our equalized value. So if those equalized values go up, then so our room to borrow max would also change.
Supervisor Quinn.
Just curious, at what rate does our equalized value increase
Yeah,
typically?
I think between last year and this year, I believe was like 1.4. Was it about?
Right, so over that 10-year period, we
No,
could
that's our
ex-
net new
Oh,
construction.
then that
Net
new
new
construction, sorry.
Our equalized value has taken significant leaps over the last 3 years. It
Right.
did about $1 billion. So we're right at about that $5 billion mark. And it jumped $1 billion last year. This year, it's not quite so significant, but it's still 500-ish million.
And our debt limit is based on a ratio of assessed value.
Equalized value.
So it seems reasonable if you can say debt level even at a payment of the evenness is the service, the payment of the service, right?
Yes.
That will in time, not over that 10-year period, that will actually become, if we leave it alone, it'll become a smaller percentage.
Right.
Yeah.
Significantly smaller percentage, not just
That's
a
right.
tiny percentage, but
Right.
significantly.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right. So this slide is kind of puts a figure number into the previous graph that I showed you. What was that ceiling? So assuming here that we would borrow in 25, 3 million, then goes down up to 26 million, and as far as 5.5 million. So average is about that 4.2 million to keep that at this ceiling here. That's the very top lighter blue. And it's just to demonstrate, so not to exceed the debt service we would need to pay for that every year, be around that 5.3. Excuse me, my mouse is
Supervisor
too
Quinn.
sensitive.
Is it reasonable for us to set that cap of 5.3 when valuations are going up and expenses are going up? Or is there another way to think about the comparison?
Certainly, one way, the purpose of this demonstration is to kind of try to help you perhaps look at forward what those opportunities might be if the decision is not to increase annual debt service going forward. It's because as we borrowing, we also paying off our debt.
So why would we not, to give the county a policy that provides for growth, why would we not base it on the actual amount of debt, the percent of debt, as you did in that initial equation, rather than the amount of debt service?
I think, if I might, I think that that's primarily, as opposed to an economic argument, I believe that the sort of the stability in bargaining is primarily a political argument.
No,
And
I don't.
no. I think that the reason that we have made that assumption is going forward, we have quite a number of supervisors who are very reasonably reluctant to increase our debt load. So this is, I think, more projection based on what might be reasonably expected from the population of supervisors that we have on hand and the voting limitations. I mean, I think that it is, I would love to see the projection as well, but I think that the reason that stability was aimed for in the projection was as much a reflection of the current trends in the county board who make that decisions as anything. Yeah. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that.
No, I know I'm not wrong. I understand you perfectly. I just strategically wonder if your reasoning is correct, because we are going to face budget crunches and we're locking ourselves into a debt service level that,
Well, we're not locking ourselves in. This is a projection of one way it could go. We can't actually bind, for example, next year's county board could decide, not next year's, but the year after. So the next county board could make a decision to say, oh, let's borrow $10 million. We have the capacity.
okay. Yeah, no, I get it. I'm not sure I like it, but I think it.
Totally fair.
Yeah, I think that I was struck sitting at our sort of table where we were doing the budgeting at our budget meeting, and at least one supervisor who had been totally opposed to increasing debt, um, said, well, I'd be willing to go a little higher. But I don't want to put the whole board in that position. It's risky, and I think this is a safer approach. But I worry that we are at some point going to have to come back and make an argument and say, well, we were wrong. And I think that may be a harder sell at that point in time than it is now.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Steen, I believe you.
Yeah, so we're talking about percentages, but as our valuation goes up, the amount of money that's required goes up. Is that correct?
The money required to
For
pay
your debt service,
the debt service is dependent on what we would borrow.
okay?
So it would fluctuate if assuming here, we would continue on borrowing X amount of dollars every year moving forward.
Okay,
So that equalized value will allow us to identify up to what dollar amount can you borrow.
and
And-
how does that translate that into taxes?
So our debt is, we levy for our debt payment, and that is above and beyond what we actually would use levy for our operations.
Okay, I understand that, but how would that relate to the guy that pays the tax bill?
No net increase in taxes from levied debt.
But,
So stable, not a tax increase.
so you're telling me that there will be no increase? I mean,
Well,
for this?
for debt, if we follow this particular plan, I'm just trying to make the distinction. The political side of the argument is on us. What we have asked staff to do is to look at it in a stable way. So I'm completely willing to have that argument, but that's us arguing with each other, not.
Yeah, but.
Beata, will you pop back a slide or to the one that's got there? Well, no, the blue one. So on here for those 10 years from 2025 to 2034, the blue is our existing, dark blue is our existing debt going down. And the light blue is the borrowing, but the amount we're paying every year, which is what we levy, stays the same.
And the only reason I'm asking all these questions is we want to explain it to the whole board
Absolutely.
is that I'm looking for a clearer way, or the clearest way if possible, to explain this, because I'm 100% in favor of being more proactive than reactive regarding our budget process. And I'm trying to think of a saleable way, or a saleable way, or a common sense way of selling this approach, and different vernacular or whatever you need to get the job done. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense?
I mean, I think,
Yeah.
a simple word story that's been helpful to me to think about is, let's say that you had $1,000 of credit card debt on your credit, had a balance of $1,000 on your credit card. And you paid off over, let's say over the next year, you paid off $100. So, but you also borrowed, you also charged $100 more. At the end of the year, you're at $1,000. That's this equation. This says,
I understand that, and I understand that the staff is doing their darndest to educate
Mhm.
Norwegians like me to get us where we belong, and I appreciate that. But and I'm just wanting to be helpful if I can be.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just trying to make sure that to keep the distinction between what we as a board, not just the executive committee, but the whole board has generally expressed versus, and how that affects what we have asked staff to do. So if we want to ask, and this has been done with PMA. So if we wanted to ask for a projection, say, looking at, this is the valuation of the county, what if we were trying to stay at a stable level of our available debt? We could ask that question, but we don't have that data here right now. Does that, and I'm, like I said, that's why we're all here. We're having the conversation. Supervisor Vogel, you appear to be,
Well, I don't know if it would help. So this is so we don't raise property taxes on borrowing, right? I mean, so that's basically, we want to show that. So I mean, you could show, okay, this would potentially raise property taxes if we did 6 million in a year, right? Is that kind of where we're just trying to show not raising taxes by borrowing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Supervisor Quinn.
So, I agree that whatever we do, we have to find a way to get, really almost get consensus on the board about how we move forward. And this might be a good way to approach it. I would be interesting if you could look at like what after 5 years, if we had some sort of expected growth in our assessed valuation, how would the percentage of debt to our budget or our limit look? So people could say, well, not only are we keeping the debt service level, but we are improving that metric that is an important metric to look at.
Yeah, we could look at debt as a percentage of the valuation. We could also look at debt versus inflation for that matter, because we're keeping it stable, we're also coming in well below inflation as well
Absolutely,
as,
yeah.
I mean, and if people are interested in that data, in the visualization of that data, I'm sure we could arrange at least a rough approximation. Okay, so we're gonna let you get back to that, but yeah, well,
All right. So this is more of a schedule that tries to paint a picture what those payments might look like under the assumption that, again, 3 million was borrowed in 24, 3 million in 25, and et cetera, based really on this schedule here. So this just kind of breaks out more in detail when the payments will come due on this issued debt and principal. And that's all.
And will you go back to that slide for just a second? Stating the obvious, if you look at the yellow boxes on the bottom, the amount of borrowing does go up as we pay off existing service. So we would borrow $3 million in 24 and 25, $4 million in 25, 26, and 26, 27, and 28, 29. Sorry, my eyes are going
Yep.
blurry here. 30, 31, 32, and 33 would be 5.5 million. And and previously our bond advisor has said, you can kind of, you're not going to create huge impact if you decide 1 year you're earlier on, you're going to borrow 5 million, or in a year you're going to borrow 3, you borrow 4, but then you back it back down. It's their averages. The average is $4.1 million, right? 4.2,
4.1 mil.
$4.1 million a year over
And-
10 years.
then for those who may be following along at home, this is one possible projection of a particularly stable way to maintain that
Right.
load without increasing taxes.
Right, which boils to this original first graph. It's not suggesting that that's what the county should do, but it tries to paint a picture as to what that might look like if the decision is to borrow and how much. But most certainly, we can reach out to PMA to do additional analysis to more specific scenarios if you have anything in mind.
Thank you. And I think this is a very reasonable proposition. I just want to make sure to make the distinction that this is a possibility. We are not at this point committing the county to do whatever.
Any other questions?
No, it looks like you're off the hook. Thank you,
All
Beata.
right, thank you.
And Chair McCullough, if I might, I'd invite Dan to come up. He'll quick show you guys the equalized valuation.
Perfect.
No, I texted him. He's
Not that surprised.
no. Oh, you're in the middle of making it.
If you need a few more minutes, we can jump to the next thing and bring you back.
Probably get into some of the questions that you had. So our change in equalized value between 23 and 24 was 7%, was a 7% increase. But I think everybody kind of caught on to the fact. So when we talk about that borrow, that was a fixed amount. So the amount of debt that we hold is pretty much staying steady as our equalized value goes up. That percentage is definitely going to go down on a yearly basis unless you increase your debt. That being said, just kind of random numbers. No. So 2024, our equalized value is about 5.4 billion. 23, it was about 5.0. 22, it was 4.2. 21, it was 3.8. 20, it was 3.6. 19 was 3.3. 18 was 3.1. 17 was 3.0. So if you look at that 17 to 18, that's a very small jump, but and that's where you really need to think of the economic times of of what that was like.
Yeah,
So,
I think it was like 2.2, 2.4 when I started on the board in 2010.
right. So yeah, as you look at that, I mean, if we were to continue to climb at like a 3% increase in 25, we'd be at about 5.6, 26 would be at 5.7, 27 would be about 5.9. So
I think it would be useful. I think it'd be very useful for the board because I'm looking at, there's projections, which is a little bit messier, and then there's data we actually have. But to speak to Tom's point, I think it might be very useful for the board to see where our debt as a percentage of our available debt, what it has done over the past decade. Just like we've brought it down this much, and I'm thinking I mean, it'll be used for the exec committee too, but I think it'd be much more, it would be very useful for the broader board for that, and perhaps a debt over 10 years versus inflation, just to show that, no, actually, we've been quite reasonable overall in debt load.
yeah. So just you
I
see,
mean, we
kind
had
of,
a couple of big borrows in there, but
yeah, projecting the total debt load to stay at 11, that 11% number that you were talking about. So in 2023, the 11% is the $28 million that's in your sheet. That would go up to 31 in 24. Sorry, 24, I put in the 3 million. So 31 and 24 is what would happen there in order to get to the kind of the 11%. You'd be looking at still right at about 31 in 25, about 31.8 in 26 and 32 and that. So it jumps up just small little bits as you look at total debt incurred. But as you mentioned, debt's falling off. Just as you borrow 3 annually, the debt is falling off at the same rate that you're borrowing. But we have a $8 million and a $7 million and a $12 million borrow that'll be falling off in future years. 27, 29, and 32. I think that's all in there. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah.
yeah, if any of you have not yet looked through the big book of all the facilities and our expected costs coming up, it's an interesting read. It's very useful. Another thing that Dan compiled that All right, hauling us back. Chris, you look like you were about to? Okay, so that's the borrowing. 2025 budget discussion and preparation.
All right, so I have a short PowerPoint for you with some data about where things are currently at. Why didn't you share? Oh, because I didn't share you. We all do it.
I mean, we
There
could
you
put
go.
on the, still within borrowing while Chris is getting the technology sorted. We could put on the agenda for exec after budget, January, February, a discussion of what generally might be a good way to look at debt, just a debt policy, as it were. Just an opening, not talking about codifying it, not talking about an action item, just potentially an initial discussion on what might be an appropriate debt policy, whether it's stability in taxes, whether it's percentage of value, whether it looks at. Would that be discussion everyone would be interested in having? Okay, so maybe February or March or somewhere in there. Okay.
Okay, here's.
Your point is very well made, Tom. And I think it's a question we should discuss in relation to that as well.
All right, here we are as of September. Obviously, these numbers still move around. We are waiting in the next, it has to be out by September 15th. So what is today, the 11th? We have 4 days to get our shared revenue numbers from the Department of Revenue, and don't have those yet, but as of today. So where are we at? Our current gap is about $7 million. This includes the 2% cost of living and the step increases for staff and 1 new position. The Sheriff's Department has again requested their recreational officer position. That's the only new position request. There is no levy to transit or the neighbors of Dunn County included in the budget, and there's no decision on the use of borrowing or fund balance or those types of things. So I wish I could make this bigger for you. I don't think I can. Squint, really squinty. All right, so this is our fund balance history. And it's starting at the top in 2018. Our unassigned fund balance, meaning we could use it however we would choose, was $8.3 million. And if you go to kind of right above the yellow line, it tells you it's in 2023, our fund balance as the auditor is going to report it is $16.7 million. And the reality of it is the $11 million is, sorry, the reality of it is that the real number is 13.7 million for 2023. So last year you passed a fund balance policy, which says that the board will spend down excess of fund balance over 50% to at least the 50% mark and no lower than the 35% mark. So currently it's sitting at 53%. So in 2024, keeping in mind that we have already utilized $1.4 million in the blue there for highway department, or for CIP, including highway department. That would reduce our kind of projected, if we spent every dollar of that, that would reduce our projected, not assuming any changes for anybody else, to $12.3 million. of the unassigned fund balance, which would be at the 47% mark. So we would have fallen below with what's been already committed for next year of 1.4 million, we would fall to the 47% mark. So scenario one, number one tells you if you wanted to go as low as the 40% mark, you'd have $2.6 million difference. And if you wanted to go to the 35% mark, you'd have $3.9 million difference of fund balance that could be applied. And anything in between. And I also did increase the kind of the expenses for 2024 projected by about 2%. So we don't know until it's sort of all done when the audit's done, but I did increase them over 2023. So essentially you have someplace between nothing and $3.9 million of fund balance to apply. If you applied the $3.9 million, you would be at a 35% ratio between fund balance, unassigned fund balance and our expenses. Questions about that? So let's just talk for a second about salary and wages. Each 1% of cost of living increase is about $360,000. So that 2% together is about that 725. Each step of increase on the wage grid is also about $725,000. So it's about right around that $1.5 million mark for all things said and done as it's currently proposed. And it's about 50-50 between cost of living and the grid. So moving the step increase to mid-year reduces that cost by about $360,000. So that is one option. There are 3.5 temporary positions in our ERP project that are included in 2025. They'll end when the project is completed, but that isn't anticipated until the end of 2025. But they won't necessarily be, they wouldn't be automatic costs going forward. And so then we've also talked a bit internally about exploring the concept of reduced work week voluntarily. Are there people who are interested in reducing their hours if their benefits stayed the same? That's one particular option as well. So here's kind of our recommendation. And this is just a recommendation. You can move these numbers any way that you wish to or want to. But our starting gap, 7 million. If you borrowed 3 and we used $1.9 million of fund balance, including purchasing our ERP with that money. If we decreased operations by 975,000 and we decreased salary by 750,000 and then used our workers' comp premium holiday for an additional $350,000, that would leave us at the zero. That would balance our budget. We can't mess with the workers' comp premium holiday because that's a calculated number based on what we can do given the confines and legalities of a workers' comp self-funded plan. But any of the other categories are all movable or wiggleable. So we would be looking for a recommendation, not necessarily in the form of a resolution, but at least a recommendation coming forward out of this group as to where you would like us to go in terms of preparation for October, and also to be reported at the county board meeting next week.
And I will note, decrease operations is decrease operational expenses, decrease salary is decrease salary increase.
It is. Yes. Good point.
Well, decreasing operations expenses is actually lowering operations expenses. Decreasing salary is not decreasing anybody's salary. It's decreasing the total increase in salary by changing the time factor. And just because decreased salary without that factored in is a much more alarming statement than decrease increase is a very different statement. That's just purely for clarification's sake. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you explain why what you're asking for from fund balance is fairly significantly below what we might use?
It really is a bit of a backed into number. We were reasonably confident in our conversation that we could find $975,000 in operational costs and reasonably confident that we could find $750,000 in salary costs. Partially because we know that if we went to the mid-year step, we'd automatically have 360,000. If we eliminated the one requested position, that would be another 120. So we knew we could get there. And so really that's a backed into number.
Yeah, the borrowing was just 3 million is the number that's been discussed.
Yeah, I know.
And partly, honestly, and I don't know that it's wrong to say this, we also created this based on at least our understanding or assessment of sort of collectively where the board might be at. There's interest in, there's not great appetite for borrowing, but there's perhaps understanding that borrowing is necessary, but there would also be a decrease in operations and a decrease in the increase of salary to go hand in hand with that. So it's a bit of what we thought might be acceptable or a reasonable compromise in terms of how to balance the budget.
Okay, and I've got Supervisor Steen and Supervisor Quinn up. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of clarification. First, part of that is the discussion we had, the budget exercise. This looks like fairly close to sort of the collective of the 5 tables. One of the thoughts on the step increase is that decoupling step and wage increase, so they're every 6 months is basically everyone, and if you keep doing that, then people are getting a 6 months increase, and it's a little bit more clear what's happening. So it's partially a funding issue, but it's also partially a way of making those things distinct and clear. So those are my clarifications. Supervisor Steen, then Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you, Chairman McCullough. If we took 1.9 out of the fund balance, what does that leave us in the fund balance?
Backwards just a second. It would leave us at 1.9, 12.3, 11.3, 10.3, 10.4, 10,400,000, right about this 40% mark. Because, oops, sorry.
Higher than that.
Because this rate, oh yeah, because 2.6 is the
like
40%, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's the 2.6.
Yep.
Supervisor Quinn. Oh, that was your, okay. Anyone else? Supervisor Kinnear.
Yeah, thank you. As I look at that, yeah, I worked and was paid under a wage grid. And each year I hoped I would get an increase in the general wages. I never counted on that, but one of the things I did count on for my plans, my budget was the wage grid. Because, there it was, what you're gonna get every year. I don't think we should cut that even for the 6 months. So that's one point. Because, there it is in black and white. As far as the actual overall wage increase that applies to the entire grid, that's something different. We've decided on, was it 2%?
It's currently set at 2%, yes.
And I like that too. But if we were to change something, that would be the thing I would change. The question on the sheriff's position, is this the same position as last year? It might be partially funded?
Yes.
It is the same as.
It's the same position. The degree to which it is funded is open to some debate.
Because
Okay.
in part because sometimes the current staff are doing the same types of duties from which they're able to to collect DNR reimbursement. So it's a little unknown as to how much more an actual position allocated to that function would be able to, how much more revenue that position would be able to collect.
Okay, so based on our discussion on that last year, there was the position and then a question on how much would get reimbursed, plus the $70,000 vehicle that had to go along with it. For the same reason, I didn't think we needed to add that position last year. I would remove that position from the budget this year. It's nice to have, but not one of those things that's absolutely necessary. So those are some thoughts.
Supervisor Headland.
I would argue the necessity of that position. I don't know if you get any communications back from the Department of Natural Resources. I do monthly. And the increase in OWI operation of UTVs and ATVs, boats, snowmobiles has increased significantly in Wisconsin. Over the last number of years, the illegal operation, in other words, people who aren't supposed to be operating them in the first place, has increased significantly. And a big part of that is that in Minnesota, you have to be a licensed driver and over 18 in order to drive a UTV on a county road. And so they come to the wild land of Wisconsin and ride the UTVs around. So I don't know if it needs to be, full time. I don't, know if there's any modification that could be possibly done, in that. But the increase of safety for Wisconsin riders is that we need to monitor the strong influx of all ridership, including Wisconsin riders. I agree with the cost is significant, but there's some way we can share with another county. I don't know, but I guess I'd like to see us try to work out something in the future to institute that position. Thank you.
Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you. Well, I agreed with Mike until I heard you talk, Von talk. I think what I'm hearing is that the department is asking for this position, and they're going to develop a strategy for how to use it and integrate. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but integrate other officers as appropriate, so that we wouldn't have. I mean, I can't see one person doing this having any impact. But if it increases the resources and it's used that way, it might make sense. And it seems like that could be evaluated at the end of the year, and we could see, well, how did this work?
Supervisor Vogel.
One question I had when I saw the new position was, because it was like 60% was gonna fund itself. But then there's $75,000 vehicle that wasn't gonna get covered. And then it said it would reduce overtime, but overtime in the department went up. So, so if it covered itself and all the expenses, I would be all for it, but I question the overtime reduction then and more coverage.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Yeah, my understanding from last year, in talking about the 60% or whatever, is actually the sheriff can assign the person that he's asking for to anything he wants. He could assign them so they wouldn't do any of this material, and maybe 10% of their time would be there, so they'd only get 10% covered. So it would really be up to whoever the sheriff was and what they wanted to use the position for and how much we'd get back.
Yeah, and I believe the goal is to essentially create within the sheriff's department about 40 hours a week of that kind of enforcement. And how exactly that would be distributed would be a decision made by the sheriff's department.
If I may, there is one other important consideration, and that would be that with the new change of shared revenue allocations last year, well, for this year, part of that requires us to maintain effort in the sheriff's department. And you have to essentially say you're not reducing services between years. So if you add a position now, you probably can't cut it.
Yeah. Yeah, the maintenance of effort for both sheriff's department and emergency services generally is a thing that we will need to keep in our heads. Thank you for that clarification. I had,
And my thanks to Dan for his text to remind me.
thank you.
Mr.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not wild about funding that position in the sheriff's department, but I'm starting here with a question. I'm not very comfortable with this, moving the salary increase to mid-year with the 750. I'm wondering what it would be like if we took that off and actually utilized fund balance up to 40%, utilized the 2.6.
If you give me a minute.
I've been
I'll play with
adding
the
numbers,
number.
but
Supervisor Bauer.
I'm gonna go with Mike on this one. I don't know if it's necessary to have another staff member, and this is gonna be not just next year, but every year we gotta pay for
Yeah.
this, and it's gonna be ongoing, and you're not gonna get rid of it once you got it, so. You also gotta look at, we can't fund it now, how are we gonna do it in the future too, so.
And I think it behooves us to be cognizant that the board as a whole has not shown a great deal of enthusiasm for new positions.
Right.
So, I mean,
Oh.
go, Randy, go ahead. Supervisor Brocknell.
Just wanted to agree. I don't think we should add another patrolman either. I just don't think we can add positions. And I agree with Diane on the salaries. I think we should see if we can get more fund balance, there. If you do the mid-year step, is that when you add the 2% at that same time, or is it 2% in January and then the mid-step would be in June?
Yeah,
It
that
would be
fine.
decoupling them so that
Right.
the raise happened at one point and the step happened 6 months apart. And
Okay.
for me, the argument there is far more about, we've had this discussion ongoing in county leadership for a while, whether that would be a way to make those things more visible as opposed to make them just like one lump sum.
Okay, yeah, okay. I think you gotta at least do the salary increase in January, the mid-step. Cause what is do you know what our percentage is of people that are maxed out on an 11 step or?
It's about
Not-
80 people. Percentage wise, we're at about 550-ish. And about 80 people are at the top.
Okay, thanks.
It's probably going to go down substantially over the next few years because we are hitting a big wave of retirements.
Okay.
So if you did as proposed, as Supervisor Morehouse proposed, $7 million, oops, let me get back over here. $7 million hole, $3 million of borrowing, $2.6 million of fund balance, the $975,000 of decreased operations, and the $350,000 premium holiday, it leaves about $50,000, just under $50,000, which again would, there's some wiggle in that salary piece.
Well, and the 750,000 currently includes the sheriff's position. So if we pull
does.
that out, that would more than offset that last 50,000. So that would bring the,
Well, that includes not allocating anything to salary right now. That number that I'm giving you, the 50,000, is if we pull the 750 out of salary.
Right.
you know, if we take that number off of there, so you'd have a 7,000, a 3,000, a 22.6 and a little extra change. Decrease in operations of 975 and the workers' comp premium holiday, and we'd still have to find about $50,000.
Is currently in that 750, so.
Yes,
So
Don't bring it to zero.
it doesn't bring it to zero.
oh,
So-
I see.
Yeah,
You have to make a decision about that.
right. That was why I was trying to make the distinction is we could in fact, yeah. Well, this. So the 750 currently includes the 360 for the step plus the sheriff's position.
Yes.
So if we pull the sheriff's position out of that, that's,
It's a hundred.
We could either use less fund balance, or we could adjust the decrease operations number.
right. I
Which
would
would
be
be-
inclined to use less fund balance on that.
Whatever. My preference would be to change the decrease operations number, but since, I mean, we haven't increased operations for years and years and years.
Yeah, the decrease in operations is a couple of very specific things that,
Oh, we didn't know that.
well, no, it's just when we were looking at possible decrease in operations, one of the things that our board sitting down and have a discussion was, you know, what do people want? And there are some places in operations where we could have a decrease right now, which isn't going to be a huge problem. We couldn't do it again, but Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you. I should probably know this, but do we know if the sheriff's department, if we would get the assistance or covering part of the cost from the state, if an existing deputy takes on that position?
It's the activities.
Yeah, we are.
So we already, that's the question about the actual amount of reimbursement, because there are already existing deputies who go off and do some of those activities and claim that reimbursement from the Department of Revenue. It's just how much more would it be if there was a full-time position dedicated to that? What would that look like?
Supervisor Headland.
I think that's where you talk about reducing overtime, is that in order to cover that reasonably, so he covers it, and then something comes up, and then there's, you know, and now there's overtime. So if you had, in a sense, those hours covered, you would maximize what he feels is necessary for that particular type of enforcement. And that should in fact then, according to him, and I guess maybe we need a better explanation, but reduce, you know, overtime costs, and for reduces overtime costs at 1.5 times that, you know, covers 1.5 times that amount of time. So I guess I'm just going from what Kevin brought up, and I thought he had, you know, kind of a reasonable explanation, but it's gonna cost more money because it has nothing to do with the vehicle.
Mhm.
Even if we covered it, you still got a vehicle expense.
And you know, don't hold me to this. The number I thought that was already offset was at like 25 to 30% of a
Yep.
position.
Yeah, it never
So
was
if you got that was why there's a discussion of 60%. Because, you know, how much of that position,
Thank you. One other thing, have we done the move to a mid-year step plan before?
no, we've not. That's it's just, it's,
It'll actually require an ordinance change.
yeah, so.
Mm.
Absolutely not married to it. I just wanted to be clear that it was not purely a fiscal decision for why it had been discussed. And if we don't, that's, I find one way or the other.
So-
Supervisor Vogel.
Give you
Oh.
this, I was just going to give you this handy dandy little
Please. Do you want to take the podium?
Yes, I can, sorry. As you're looking at options to balance the budget, I just want to throw one item on there to consider as you're making those decisions. Now, as you're thinking about increasing using the fund balance, I wanted to kind of address like what would be the best practice for using a fund balance. So I looked at the highway based on what Dustin prepared in round 2. Assuming here 3 million would be applied of debt, he would need 1.5 that can be justified to apply fund balance for projects. The remaining difference would be where I would say it's kind of like that area to consider. Do you wish to use the fund balance for operating purposes where the intent of fund balance is typically best used for one-time projects? This is your go-to on the rainy day fund. So it's crossing that line where you would be possibly potentially using those savings to pay regular operating expenses. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes, one of the reasons for keeping that total fund balance number lower.
Right. So how it stands now, again, assuming that highway would be allowed to borrow the 3 million, highway alone would need 1.5 million of additional, could be that fund balance. So anything over that would go to other departments.
Think it'd be out of, you probably want to stay there for a minute. Supervisor Steen, did you have a?
Well, I think that we've perhaps used the fund balance in the past to cover shortfalls in the Human Services Department. And therefore, some of those shortfalls were operating expenses. So I think we've already done that, and that's part of what we have. You know, so it isn't like it hasn't been done, and that's utilizing your rainy day fund for, what you need.
It just depending on what you do, it becomes non-sustainable. Because you do it this year and then next year you have that cost and you've used your fund balance. So now you have any additional cost, the cost that you've used fund balance for, and you don't have any fund balance left. So I think Beata's just saying, go cautiously.
Right.
So here's your,
Thank you.
here's your numbers to play with. If you want to change something and see how it'll, right now with 3 million in borrowing, 2.6 in fund balance, operations, workers' comp, and eliminating the new position from the sheriff's department, this would be your balance, which meaning that we have that much more money to reapply. You could potentially reduce something else by that amount. Or, yeah, you could borrow $72,000 less or something.
Supervisor Headland.
Yeah, and, I appreciate everything. Everybody's come up with some good ideas. Haven't heard any bad ideas. But, one thing, I guess, just going back to the workshop and what seemed to be more palatable, I'm gonna say, and I know that's Kelly's, hasn't called it that, but anyway, was that the sense I got in a couple groups I talked to, the group I worked with, and then, another group, was that there was more appetite for covering a bigger percentage of the highway with borrowed money and a stronger leave in the fund balance. And I agree with Beata's thinking on that. Yeah, if you have to, that's why it's there. But we got into that before where we just kept, oh, okay, how much we can take out of fund balance? We're down budgeting, and we could go home. And like Chris said too, those expenses, those line of expenses are going to be there next year. And then if we don't have, if we ever, we can't cover them by staying above the 35%, then we don't want to borrow for operations of the admin department.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll note that what I'm trying to do from my so there's my magic wand position, give me a magic wand, I can solve the problem however I want. That's one answer. That's not on the table. There's my kind of what I would like, and there's what I think is possible. And those are not always the same thing. And we need to separate the ideal position from what is actually possible. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, and I, I understand the concerns about rating fund balance for operations. If I thought it were more palatable, I mean, I would have come back to say, why don't we borrow more money rather than utilize the additional $700,000 approximately from fund balance? I don't think, I mean, I don't know if that'll fly. I don't know what to say. Hence the suggestion that we utilize fund balance for the additional short.
Chris, did you? Okay,
Nope, nope.
I looked up and saw that your microphone was on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Supervisor Quinn.
I'm just a little confused, Chris. So we have the new position still up there for 120,000. Oh, okay. I got you. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That position is gonna bring in funding.
But he also budgeted a squad car.
Is the squad car a capital expense? I imagine.
It's not in our capital
Is it
improvement
an
plan.
operations?
It's in our operations.
So that
Right. You could make this, well, like Beata said, some of this was, I just left it at this because this is the position, would be position plus squad minus whatever revenue. So you can play with those numbers, but probably a fair estimation of what would be saved. The squad is in this. Yep. There you go. But well, no, but we would cut that in what could be additional operations if you make that operations cost more.
Supervisor Steve.
Yeah, just a comment, the 1 year hiatus on the workers' comp premium, we won't have that next year.
Correct.
No, what that
Well-
saves us is charging the departments out that cost. So because we're self-insured, we charge the departments that money and then we take it back and put it in our workers' comp fund, self-funded plan. And all we're doing is just giving them the break for the year. And we're only calculating on departments who don't claim against grants because it doesn't make any sense for them not to be able to claim against that cost. But you're right, it is a one-time thing, but it will just revert to what they're used to in the future years.
But my question is, where do we get the 350,000 next year?
For 2026.
Yeah, the year after. Because it's no different than saying that if you take it out of the fund balance, then you don't have it. Well, we're not gonna have this either. For one time, we will.
Well, I mean, that's sort of our fundamental job is you kick the can to next year's budget and then you look around and you see how hard you have to kick it to the year after that. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of rope us back in here so that we do eventually get to leave. Just give me a quick thumbs up on the sheriff's, thumbs up, thumbs down on the sheriff's position.
No.
Okay. That's a clear no. Okay. I'm sorry, Kevin. So we'll put, let's pull that out. Yep.
Here, yeah, that's number.
That gets us with this set of recommendations, which includes keeping the step increase with the wages. That gets us to the number we need. Are we comfortable bringing the number as it is to the county board, or is there anything anybody else really feels the need to try and add or subtract? Going once? Okay. Let's go ahead and call that our recommendation of the moment, I guess.
Okay. So then, as a meeting with Chair McCullough earlier in the week, then what I would intend to say to the board next Wednesday would be, this is the current recommendation of the executive committee. If people have strong thoughts about things that should be changed in this, then they should reach out and share their concerns before the October executive committee meeting.
Yep, or, we strike a money fountain in the basement and solve everything, that'd be great too.
Come listen to a story about a man named Jed.
Okay. So we got direction there. Item 8, reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee, budget adjustment. Y'all know how this works. I believe we need Supervisor Steen is moving. Supervisor Bauer has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're good. Resolution appointing corporation counsel. Do we need that one approved here?
Yes, I have some recommendations for language changes and because the resolution is drafted, makes the appointment effective on September 23rd. I'm still going to be here on September 23rd. So, I, I just changed the verbiage of the resolution and I'll read it. It's short, I swear. County, be it resolved, the County Board of Supervisors, effective September 23rd, 2024. James McMenamy is appointed as a Corporation Counsel designee with appointment to the Corporation Counsel position to be effective upon the retirement of the Corporation Counsel Nicholas P. Lang on or about January 10, 2025. In the interim period, James McMenamy will be employed by Dunn County as a regular full-time employee in the Corporation Counsel office. So, and it's, right now we have a vacancy. We had an assistant corporation counsel, Christian, who was doing a great job. And he left in July. And so we're at 2 now. And so this will help us get some stuff, get some wood chopped.
Okay, so I need a motion and a second for the resolution as proposed by Nick. Supervisor Steen, Supervisor Headland, any speaking to the resolution? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item C, ordinance amending 2055 Land Information Council. You.
Hello, I'm Rachel Wells. I'm the Land Information Officer here in Dunn County. What's presented in front of you today are just minor changes to really bring the ordinance up to date with how it has been operating. At the time it was originally adopted, the CIO was the LIO and there wasn't a separate position. So this language will clarify that. Similarly, the land assessment coordinator position doesn't exist anymore. So we have a real property lister. So those changes are there. And then the final change as it relates to the realtor position is just to clarify that there's opportunities for other realtors to participate in this if they would like to. So those are really what the changes are. Any questions?
Doesn't look like it. Great, thank you. Let you get back and off of your feet. Okay, so I would need a motion in a second. Supervisor Calabrese, moves, Supervisor Steen seconds. Any speaking to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Sorry, I keep stepping on Randy's eye, just the tail end of it. I remember the trail. All right, resolution to amend capital improvements plan for solar geothermal. We talked about this a little bit at the budget workshop. Does anyone need more information on that? All right, then a motion in a second. Supervisor Vogel, Supervisor Kinnear. Any further speaking? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Uh, I keep stepping on Randy. Okay, so motion passes. Review of reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees, planning, resources and development, rezone, Friedenfels. Tom, is there anything you want to add, or is this just pretty?
It's a standard.
Okay, great. Motion in a second. Oh, no, this one is coming forward. I don't need to do that. We're good.
Apparently, I failed to include your committee reports on the agenda.
No reports from standing committees. They're here.
Sure.
Item 10. They're on mine.
Oh, I
They're on mine.
have two random agendas stuck together. Never mind.
Okay, standing committees. Supervisor Calabrese.
Could I request to go first? I have 2 children at home. and
Absolutely.
I'll see what the hell house looks like when I get back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Judiciary and Law Committee met here on August 26th. And in addition to all the reports from the departments, they presented their budget requests to be carried over into this committee. We spent some time talking about one of those today. And most of the budgets are pretty straightforward and simple and similar to last year. And what's the other thing I was going to say? The sheriff did have to, where is that? Oh, he's made a contingent offer for another patrol position to fill a vacancy. And they're hoping to get a few more out there to fill their other vacancies. Other than that, it was relatively uneventful. And the next meeting will be here on September 30th at 4:30.
Thank you, Supervisor Calabrese, and you are excused to go see about the remnants of your house.
Thank you.
Supervisor Prochnow, I'm going to put you up next so that I don't forget you.
Thanks. A little slow over on this side. Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Highway met this morning. Basically, we got County Road Z project is complete. It's been a 3-year project. So it's completed basically from Downsville to Old Galley now. So all brand new road, 3 years in the making, but it's all done. County Road B project is going along pretty well. Storm sewers and the lanes are basically laid on both sides. They should be all open. Both lanes, both going north and south, should be open by October 3rd. There'll be a small closure like around that October 1st, 2nd at the railroad for getting the lights, lights working between the arms and the stop sign lights for that road right there between Loves and exit 45. So there will be a closure there around that October 1st area to get that all synchronized. Otherwise, we started County Road B up north. That's getting worked on. We got 8 bridges for submittals that we got to work on for 2027 and 28, but that we're going to be doing some qualification requests for. Next meeting is October 9th.
Great, thank you, Supervisor Prochnow. So I'm noticing on CRNT that there's a broadband notice as well. So I'm guessing there's some broadband news, or it just got added on with the.
The broadband committee met earlier today, so I didn't know if there'd be an update.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, because I've got the extra note on my agenda. So CRNT, Supervisor Bauer, and microphone.
Sorry.
No worries.
Mr. Chair, we met on August 20th at 4:30. Area Director Kristen updated us on the livestock educator. Interviews are going well, I guess, so that's going pretty good. Louisa gave a 10-minute presentation. Dan Dunbar introduced Adam Akoa, which was brought up earlier today, that he'll be at our county board meeting. It was introduced as a new position. Dan also gave an update on Explore Menominee with the completion with Melissa. That's going pretty well, so pretty much that's about it. We approved the extension for UW extension. We approved their budget and moving it forward, so.
Thank you, Supervisor Bauer. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee administration met August 22nd here. Again, we, as standard business, we heard from all of our departments with written reports and budget updates. We did have a report then from Kerber Rose on that audit report. And just one thing, as you look over that report, if you haven't already and are going to for the meeting, there's one section in there towards the end of recommendations. Along with that, there was a finding of some credit card bills that weren't copies of the bill, so to speak, that weren't submitted. None of the charges were found to be bad charges. It's just that he recommended that we be a little stricter and make it known that we expect everyone to make sure they bring in those slips for anything that they use the county credit cards for. So again, it's not an issue where someone is use a credit card for their own purpose. It was just an issue of not remembering to get those slips turned in. So beyond that, I thought we had a good report on the audit. Mr. Bauer, anything you'd add on the audit?
Sounds pretty good, actually.
All right. Our next meeting will be Thursday. There you go. Thank you. I had it here. I switched my page on the computer. And here at 3 o'clock. I do have one other report. I serve as the representative of this county board on the West Cap board. And I am the now president of the West Cap board, which has added a whole lot more than they told me that it was going to. The other thing, I guess the reason I did accept it, I held off for a couple months, was the fact that they are going to be replacing their director. He is going to be retiring. And so I guess he asked me personally, as the fact that, we've had a lot of hiring here of executive and in professional positions, and they just wanted me to kind of help direct that affair. So I will be doing that, and but it's after that they put in a slight request that maybe I be some sort of a committee person at large. That one I don't know. But anyway, for the next 2-year term, I will be expected to be the president of the West Cap Board of Directors. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Supervisor Headland, and congratulations. Supervisor Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Facilities Committee actually met twice since the last meeting we had. So we met kind of emergency meeting on July 22nd to talk about rezoning of the transfer station property. So we approved to restart that, to start the rezoning process from general agricultural to commercial or light industrial. So that would make the property a little maybe a little more desirable. And then we met on August 14th, and we had the report from Verigy, which was the energy audit report that Dan shared with us again at the budget meeting. And so that's why we brought that amendment to the capital improvements for that 11 million project of geothermal and then the solar field. Since the HVAC in the judicial needs to be replaced anyways, and they said this would be more efficient and the funding is very desirable right now, plus all the credits that are available. We also had a recap of the fair because the fair had been done. All the entries were up, all the numbers. So she'll have the final report soon. In operations, they were busy helping with the fair, mowing lawns, cleaning buildings for storage. And so that is, and our next meeting is September 25th at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Supervisor Vogel. Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. I've got to applaud Supervisor Vogel and the committee. Don Keeter, if he was alive right now, would be just flying in the air.
Yeah, he really.
Off 10 feet off the ground, hearing that kind of news. And so that's great.
I do intend to bring that up when we bring it to vote.
Okay, this is a report for the neighbors of Dunn County. We had a couple of meetings in August, just like you guys did. So one was a special meeting for a budget, and that was approved. And the budget this year projected profit is $450,000. Now, if you took out the depreciation, it's 1.1 million. Because the depreciation isn't really a cash flow. So it's looking pretty good for this year. And for next year, we've budgeted for even more of a profit. Oh, let's see. Alyssa Doty gave a review of the life enhancement activities, and it's amazing what Alyssa and some of the other people do with the folks there, neighbors. They take them everywhere. The use of our pool staff, which costs a lot, is trending down, which is good. COVID has slowed some admissions, so you can't admit when there's COVID in a particular way. And because we really made good use of our 2 meetings, we're not going to meet till October.
Ooh.
The 4th Thursday of October. So, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health and Human Services Board last met on August 22nd, and I believe that we achieved a world's record. We were out of the meeting in an hour. I believe that has never happened. We reviewed the July DHS vouchers. We, of course, had reports from all 3 of our departments. Always great. We reviewed for the second time all 3 of the proposed budgets and approved them. And also approved a budget adjustment for DHS, which you saw a bit earlier. Our next meeting is September 26th. We still have 2 resolutions that we have enacted. One on mental health, which was requested of counties by the Wisconsin Counties Association, and another on the Medicaid program. So they're still floating around. We haven't had them reviewed at legislative or here, but they're waiting to be reviewed. And our next meeting is September 26th. That's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. Supervisor Steen, do you have something you would?
Well, not really. I was just going to ask Chris that a legislative meeting should be in order prior to our next executive meeting.
That's what when we got to the next meeting date, I was going to say, prepare for a legislative committee meeting that day as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Supervisor Steen. Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you. Real brief. We last met in August, I think it's like 24th, something like that. And we skipped we last met in, August. Yeah. And we, anyway, we had a short meeting. We approved the zoning changes going to come before the board. And we had some just updates from staff, including a discussion of potential rezone of the solid waste disposal site, so it would be appropriate for sale. I think we are going to hold off on that till our October meeting in order to give the town board time to provide us some of their advice as to whether they want that to be light industrial or commercial. So, and then we had a comprehensive plan update. And our next meeting is September 18th, and that's all.
Thank you, Supervisor Glenn. Well, our next meeting will be October 9th. And with that, we are adjourned.